The ketogenic diet is something that's been getting a ton of attention lately, so you may think it's the latest fad diet out there. However, it's been around for nearly 100 years, and it was originally designed as a medical treatment. So, in this video, I'll be talking about the ketogenic diet and why I chose it as a foundation for my own personal fitness journey. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. In my last video, I talked about diet and what I felt needed to be addressed in my own diet based on previous experiences with dieting and also needing to fit food into my work schedule. Because we all need to eat, right? Those reasons and others led me to the ketogenic diet as a potential winning strategy. So, what the heck is a ketogenic diet? Short answer, it's a way of eating that signals your body to start using fats as its main fuel source. But to better understand the diet and find out my motivations for using it as my foundation, let's dig in a little bit deeper. Macros. What are macros? Macro is short for macronutrients, and those are things that we need in relative abundance in our bodies, as opposed to micronutrients, which would be like vitamins and minerals. And if you've ever dieted before or tracked your calories before, you know we're focused on three main things: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Those are your three main macros. Okay, so let's dive in. Carbohydrates. First off, we have carbohydrates. Carbs are pretty much only used for energy in the body. We break down complex carbs into simple carbs into glucose, which our cells can use to make adenosine triphosphate, better known as ATP. The body takes into account our energy demands at the time, and if we need some immediate energy, it's going to break down that glucose and give us the ATP we need. ATP is our basic unit of energy, more or less, in the body, so keep that in mind for later. Once our bodies satisfy that energy need, it starts to store those carbohydrates, that glucose, that ATP, in our muscles and liver as glycogen. Once those glycogen stores are full, because keep in mind, we only have 1 to 2 days worth of onboard storage of carbohydrates. Once that storage is full, we start changing those carbohydrates, those sugars, into long-term storage, or fats. So, next up, we have proteins. Proteins are pretty essential, obviously. They get broken down into amino acids, and then they can be used to build new proteins, enzymes, hormones, a host of things, really. But unlike carbohydrates, we don't have any specific mechanisms to store excess proteins in the body. So what happens to all the excess protein? Well, some of that excess protein can actually satisfy our energy needs. We can break down that protein and start using it for energy. However, just like excess carbs, we can eventually start storing those as fats as well. So that brings us back to fats. Although we typically think of fats as a bad thing and just a storage unit for the body, they're actually pretty important. Fats, also known as lipids, get broken down into triglycerides and cholesterol. Now, those are two things you've probably heard about and been told to limit. However, they get broken down into essential fatty acids, and as the name suggests, they're pretty essential. Fats supply the crucial parts to make and repair cells. They support our hormone system, and they can even transport some vitamins. So, pretty critical stuff there. Not to mention, they have a huge bang for the buck energy-wise. 1 gram of fat actually provides twice the amount of calories versus 1 gram of carbohydrates. You're looking at 4 calories per gram of carbohydrates versus 9 calories per gram of fats. To put that a different way, 1 gram of carbohydrates is capable of producing 30 to 40 units of ATP, which again, like I said, is our main unit of energy. Not bad. Well, 1 gram of fats can actually produce over 100 units of ATP. That's a pretty drastic difference. Okay, but why am I getting into all this sciencey stuff, right? Well, I really don't want you to just follow me in blindly and do it because it's the fad right now. That's not the whole point. The point of this channel is to test and experiment and disseminate some information that I find out. Now, I really want you to do your own research as well to either correct me or back me up. That's what this is about. Community, right? I'm laying out my personal reasons, I'm laying out my personal research, and I'm also testing on myself. So I just don't want you to say, hey, he's doing it, it's working, I'm going to do it too. If you want to, that's fine, but I want you to be able to understand what's going on in your body. So that's kind of why I went through all of that. Plus, all of that explanation was kind of just to explain that fats are a very crucial storage unit for the body. It hangs out, pun intended, waiting for us to be in need of some energy and go through some fun beta oxidation so it can produce ATP. However, if you're like me, you may be a tad bit overfed. So the thing is, your calories that you're taking in just get burned. Your body goes to the fast fuel source, the easy stuff, the sugars and the carbohydrates. So we never actually call upon those fat stores. So what's the solution? Honestly, I'm not 100% sure, and that's kind of why I'm going through this whole fitness journey. Again, I just don't want you to do it blindly. I'm testing it out. I want to talk the talk and walk the walk. I want to test and tune and figure out what's going to work, because what works for me isn't necessarily going to work for you. So keep that in mind. Genetics definitely play a part in all of this. But that being said, I think all too often weight loss gets boiled down into calories in versus calories out. And okay, I understand, conservation of energy and all that kind of stuff, but calories in versus calories out has never gotten me to a six-pack. So what's the deal? Well, like I said a minute ago, I think we may be a little bit overfed, so our bodies don't actually get to call on those fats. But also, I think insulin resistance plays a big part, and maybe our bodies don't know how to process those fats as efficiently as they once did. So that's kind of why I'm going on this journey. I want to become less insulin resistant. I want to stop myself from getting to that point of prediabetes or diabetes. I want to see if I can tune my body to start burning those fats. All that being said, while I was doing research for this video, while I was doing research for this fitness journey, I started noticing that all the main diet fads, going back to the fads thing, all the main diet fads focused on eliminating one specific macro, low carb, high fat, low protein, high fat, high carb, low fat, just all mixed up. You have names like South Beach Diet, Atkins, Dash, on and on and on. And it truly made me consider why someone would deem one main macro as evil. Also, how could that even work long term? I mean, I'll definitely concede that point to you if you're making a statement against me trying the ketogenic diet, which more or less eliminates carbs. I understand it. I get why there's a pushback on that. But what got me over the hump and kind of past that was the biological processes that I talked about earlier, and also the side effects of a ketogenic diet, if you will. Again, that's why I wanted to do that little deep dive really quick, because I wanted you to kind of understand my thought process. I wanted you to see what I see and understand what you're getting into if you choose to go along with me and do the ketogenic diet. So through my research, fats are the only macros that could shapeshift in a crisis situation and really make up for the missing macros. So I'm not saying I want to totally put my body in a crisis state. Don't get me wrong. If I can find a healthy way to eat that also allows my body to do something with those excess fat stores that aren't doing anything for me anyway, then why not consider it? Again, let me emphasize, in a healthy way. Oh, one more thing to ponder before we move on here. If you're eating a high carb, low fat diet, but you're eating in excess, and excess carbs get turned into fat, then are you really eating a low fat diet? Okay, I think I should finally explain the diet, right? The ketogenic diet is a high fat, moderate protein, low carb diet. Now, the classic ketogenic diet is a 4-to-1 ratio, which means that 4 parts of fat to 1 part everything else. Roughly, that equates to about 90% fats and 10% everything else. However, the diet that I'm looking to follow is closer to 75 to 80% fats and then roughly 20% proteins with 5% carbohydrates. When we eat a ketogenic diet, our bodies start to depend less and less on carbohydrates. If you were to do something like a 1-week fast, which I wouldn't recommend without a doctor's supervision, you would reach a state of ketosis within 24 to 48 hours, which to me affirms that 1 to 2 day carb storage limit. Now, that brings up a new question, right? What the heck is ketosis? Well, ketosis is when our bodies start to produce ketone bodies in the liver, and start to use those for energy. You can think of ketones as the fat equivalent of glucose. Most of the body's cells can utilize ketones for fuel. Actually, they can even cross the blood-brain barrier and support our nervous system. Doing a little rewind here, let's think back and remember that 1 gram of fat can produce 100 units of ATP, which means our energy needs are covered in spades. Well, what about those cells that can't utilize ketone bodies for energy? Remember I said most cells of the body can use ketones for energy? Well, some actually need glucose, like hepatocytes and red blood cells. So what happens then? Well, that's one of the more amazing processes that I find through the ketogenic diet. Our bodies are actually able to take those triglycerides, those fats and triglycerides, and break them into glucose through a process called gluconeogenesis. I mean, it's kind of logical if you think about it, because carbs get turned into fats for long-term storage, so why wouldn't the inverse potentially be possible, right? Anyway, I still think it's amazing. Also, that process is how we avoid hypoglycemia while on the ketogenic diet. Okay, that covers the carb side of things, but what about proteins? Well, to talk about the proteins, I'm going to have to address something that may scare some people off about the ketogenic diet. When we're eating the ketogenic diet, we're kind of tricking our bodies into starvation mode. It's a fasting mimicking diet, if you will. Let's go way, way, way back when we were a hunter-gatherer species. Basically, not that long ago. But hunter-gatherer, you think of feast and famine, where food wasn't readily available in the supermarket. So in times where we had ample amount of food, we would take it in, we would eat it, we would have full glycogen stores, we would start having fat on our bodies. Think of an animal before it goes into hibernation. And then during the famine time, we would slowly start to burn through all of that, burn off those fat stores, and go into a state of ketosis naturally. It was a natural thing that we used to do, kind of go in and out of ketosis. Okay, so again, what about the proteins, right? Well, keeping in that wild theme, assume that it's a kill or be killed world, and our bodies do not want to take the proteins out of our muscles unless it absolutely has to. So in this way, the ketogenic diet is a naturally protein-sparing diet. All right, that pretty much covers all the macros and a lot of the backstory, but what the heck are you supposed to eat on a ketogenic diet? The easiest answer to that is to just take the standard food pyramid and flip it on its head. On the bottom, your foundation is going to be healthy fats and oils. So coconut oil, olive oil, avocados, even full-fat dairy and cheeses if you'd like to do that. Some people stay away from dairy on that, so I'll just mention that here and now. Also good is going to be fatty meats, organ meats, skin-on poultry, seafood, and eggs. Moving on up, you're going to have vegetables. You want to eat lots of vegetables. Things like cauliflower, broccoli, kale, spinach. Something crucial to remember here is that fiber is a pretty critical part of the ketogenic diet. Next up, we're going to have nuts. So you're going to look at high-fat nuts like macadamia nuts, pecans. Then almonds and cashews are a little bit lower down the line. Pay attention to your labels. Some things are higher in carbohydrates than others, so just be aware of that. Also, some fruits and berries are actually allowed on the ketogenic diet. So things like blueberries, strawberries. Again, just kind of look at your labels and kind of learn as you go. Personally, when I start to eat a ketogenic diet, like I said, I've done it earlier in 2017 just for a few months, but my main focus, I found what works for me, which may not work for you, but what works for me is to focus on carbohydrates and then trying to keep those carbohydrates between 25 and 50 per day, 25 to 50 grams per day, that is. And then after you get to that carb limit and you're kind of used to that, start looking at your protein and potentially dial down your protein to the right ratios. Because if you eat excess protein, that can actually keep you out of a ketogenic state. This is where something like MyFitnessPal comes in clutch, because you can easily scan labels, you can input all your stuff and really see that macronutrient breakdown. Side note, you can actually go into your settings on MyFitnessPal and set it up how you want for your percentages so that you can eat a ketogenic diet versus your standard American diet, which is what's dialed in already. But really, this can be as complex or simple as you make it. All right, now that we have a general idea of what to eat and how to eat and all of that, let's touch on those side effects that I mentioned earlier. Number one is instant weight loss, basically. So what actually happens is once we start eating a ketogenic diet, we start not storing carbs, we burn through those, and once we get rid of those carbs, we begin a flushing process. See, a 1 gram of carbs actually binds with 2 grams of water, as opposed to fats, which can be stored in a dry environment. So once we start getting rid of those carbs, we're actually getting rid of the water that's bound to it. Number 2 is something that I touched on in my last video, and that is insulin resistance. When we eat in a ketogenic way, we start to reduce that insulin resistance. And like I mentioned, there's actually some diabetics, some type 2 diabetics that eat a ketogenic diet and completely reverse the effects of the disease, which I think is pretty incredible. Number three is one of the main draws for me, and that is cancer prevention. Remember earlier when I said that most of the body cells can use ketones as fuels? Well, the ones that can't actually lack mitochondria. And what's this got to do with cancer? Well, most cancer cells actually suffer from mitochondrial dysfunction and are not able to use their mitochondria to process those ketones. So you don't feed them, they starve. Good deal, right? Also related to cancer prevention and treatment is the fact that a ketogenic diet is very satiating. So that means that we can potentially start doing intermittent fasting, which would allow us to potentially restrict our eating window and allow our bodies to naturally go through autophagy and apoptosis, which, like I said in my last video, allows our bodies to look around and do that kind of house cleaning and get rid of those precancerous cells before they start to give us any trouble. Well, I think we've pretty much reached the end of this one. So if you're still watching, and which you are, I think you're pretty awesome. I appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button, and if you're new here, please consider subscribing. Like I said, that's about it, so I will catch you on the next one. Thanks.